Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Copilot Compass, where each week we take a deep dive into Microsoft 365 Copilot. As always, I have the pleasure of being joined by my esteemed colleague, fellow Copilot enthusiast, and our resident smart guy, Logan.
Thanks, Grant. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And Logan, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit more about what they can expect from this week's episode?
Yeah. So as always, we're going to start with the question of the week, and then we'll get into our topic, which is Copilot for sales. So we're going to discuss, what that is, how it's different from M365 Copilot and all the other types of Copilot, and how it works. So yeah, it should be fun. Make sure you stay tuned to the end for a sneak preview of what we have coming up next, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.
All right. Well, it's an interesting topic this week. Ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's get into our question of the week. And remember, you can either leave a comment on this video or email the email address in the description to leave your own question. So this week, our question is, what do you see people struggle the most with when they first get a Copilot license?
Yeah, struggle the most with. I think prompting probably. We've spent so long, like when we're doing like a Bing search or using Google and trying to search the internet for something, you're trying to just kind of hit keywords, and so you're trying to keep it short and concise. And I think a lot of people start out doing that with their prompts, where it's like, very to the point but short prompts. I think there really is an art of putting together a good prompt. And I think, struggling with, they struggle with, for early users, I should say, or struggle with, like, how do I provide it with the right context? How do I give it the right instructions for it to really give me what I want? And I also think too that, like they give some kind of a basic, like really simple prompt, but they kind of have something different in the back of their mind. And they get frustrated because the output's not quite fitting what they were looking for. And that's where, when you have those really specific asks, it's good to be specific, or really specific needs, I should say. It's really good to be very specific with your prompting. So that's what I would say. I'd say, just not knowing how to put together a good prompt. What about you? I mean, does anything come to mind for you with, the early users struggling with Copilot?
Yeah, I would say that I think it's difficult for people to grasp all the different ways that you can use Copilot. And I think a lot of people kind of maybe just treat it as chat GPT. Maybe that's what they're using before and kind of just see just type in the chat box, and that's pretty much it. When there's so much more you can do, like all the integrations with the different applications that we've been covering. It's not, the Copilot button is right there, but it's not necessarily intuitive of all the different things you can do unless you take some type of training or watch our podcasts. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's kind of under the hood that you kind of have to dive a little bit deeper to fully get the most out of it. That's not necessarily super readily apparent. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, as you were talking, I thought of one other thing too is, especially like you talking about ChatGPT, that's kind of what sparked my mind here. But, like when we have people that have maybe used like, the free version of Copilot, and now they've gotten that Microsoft 365 Copilot license and have the access to the full SKU. I think their habit is, I go to, copilot.microsoft.com, or and can't even remember if exactly that's what the site is, but you know what, you get the gist. They go to Copilot, and then they forget that there's a difference between the work and web toggle now. Like they might ask it to find some kind of a file for them, but they have the web tab open, or vice versa. They've got some generic question that they want to ask from publicly available information, but they have work toggled on. And some organizations too, like when you deploy it, you can by default either allow or not allow web-based information when you have that work tab, and you even as a user can change that. So if your deployment is, you don't use web-based information when you use the work chat, you might get really frustrated when you're like, well, why can't it tell me the capital of Mississippi, or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely, opportunities for struggle, but at this early stages. But what I would encourage companies is invest in a good change management and adoption plan. Spend the time on that. It's going to be worth it. And then for users, if you're getting frustrated, try to stick with it, continue to experiment. I can promise you that it's going to get easier. So
Absolutely.
good question. Are we ready to dive into our topic of the week?
Yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. All right, so our topic of the week is we're going to take just a quick overview of Copilot for sales. So, I think there's a lot of solutions that are underneath this Copilot umbrella at this point, or this Copilot suite. You've got the Copilot chat, which is kind of that free version of Copilot where you can build agents and give end users access to agents through Studio and message packs. You've also got the Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is what our podcast here has been traditionally very focused on, which is the version of Copilot that does two things primarily. One is it integrates through Microsoft Graph with your work data, but it's also going to integrate with those Office tools you're using every day, like Outlook, Teams, Word, PowerPoint, you name it. Go back to previous episodes, we've covered a lot of those in some detail. Copilot for Sales is a different product altogether. So what we're going to do today is we're going to split up into three parts. So our first part is we're going to kind of compare and contrast what Microsoft 365 Copilot brings to the table versus the Copilot for Sales SKU. So we'll kind of compare and contrast those. Then we're going to share with you some very, high level, what does Copilot for Sales offer to users? Especially might be important for those of you that are in sales or sales management roles, or have a sales department underneath you. And then lastly, we are going to show you just kind of one really quick demo, one use case that we've found to be pretty impactful as we're starting to experiment more and more with it. So with that, let's dive right in. What do you say, Logan?
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so what are the differences between M365 Copilot and then Copilot for Sales? So they are a different product and they're not additive to each other. So what I mean by that is it's not like you have to have one to have the other. They do complement each other quite well. So, I think, just to be transparent, like I use both in my day to day, but again, you can certainly have access to them separately. You don't need to have one to have the other. The M365 Copilot, that SKU is the one that's going to get you access to your work data that's shared through Outlook, through OneDrive, SharePoint, and then also like your email history, Teams that calls it recorded, things like that. So it's got that graph connector to it. And then it also integrates with the Office suite. So with Outlook, Word, Teams, PowerPoint, like we mentioned in the intro here. Copilot for Sales is a bit different of an animal. So it's not going to have that direct integration by itself into Word. Like, the experience of saying, hey, write me a blog article on this um, is not available to you if you are only licensed with Copilot for Sales. Now, some of those experiences that you have with the M365 Copilot SKU are going to be enhanced with Copilot for Sales. So at the end of the day, what Copilot for Sales, the main value that it's bringing to an organization is if you're using a third-party CRM to maintain, those customer relationships. If you have Dynamics, then you can use the M365 Copilot. But if you're using something like Salesforce to manage your CRM, that integration is brought to you with Copilot for Sales. Couldn't be any easier to set up. I'm not an extremely technically savvy person. Usually if I have a technical question, I bring it to Logan. But, even in this case, couldn't have been easier. The first time I logged into it, once I got my license, it just asked me to log in with my Salesforce credentials. And then it trickled down into everything, my Outlook, my Teams, all of those things. And I'm not exaggerating. It took me less than a minute. Very easy to set up. But with that, it kind of integrates with your sales data. So now, you can have it, if you're in Outlook, or in a Teams meeting, even you can have Copilot for Sales update directly into your Salesforce account. And it's going to bring some sales enrichment data into your Teams meetings. So those are kind of the main differences. The other difference here is going to be the price point. So Copilot for Sales is going to be about $50 per user per month, whereas the Microsoft 365 Copilot is going to be about $30 per user per month. So bit of a price difference. And again, if you buy the $50 per month Copilot for Sales, that does not get you all of the features and functions of Microsoft 365 Copilot. So if you want kind of the best of both worlds, you're budgeting out about $80 per user per month. But um, I think there's still the value is still definitely there. I think especially if you're doing a lot of maintenance in your CRM or you have really deep relationships with customers where you've got a history there. There's been several opportunities you've worked with them on different products, or you've had different services that you've done with them. You can really enrich those conversations, and it can cut down on the time that's required to prepare for a meeting while still appearing prepared for the meeting. So, with that, I think we can dive in and talk a little bit more about what Copilot for Sales brings to the table. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So, as we mentioned in the intro, today we're here to talk to you about Copilot for Sales. Now, typically we are covering Microsoft 365 Copilot, but today we'll break off a little bit and cover the sales SKU. So, um, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of compare the features and the differences between the two products. Then we'll talk a little bit about the licensing and pricing differences. And we do have just kind of one demo for you today. And if you are somebody that is doing a lot of cold calling or cold emails, or you're entering contact information like new contact info into your CRM on a regular basis, stay tuned for that demo. Really, really big time savings there. So, with that, let's dive in and talk about Copilot for Sales.
Well, let's do it.
All right, so Copilot for Sales, what is it? We've talked in the past about what are the differences between Copilot Chat, which is the free Copilot, versus M365 Copilot, and those obviously are quite different. Copilot for Sales, you can think of it almost as an additive to Microsoft 365 Copilot. So, um, with Copilot for Sales, you are going to get integration into your third-party CRMs. So if you are, for example, if you are a Salesforce customer with Microsoft 365 Copilot, you can't draw information from your Salesforce, nor can you make updates with Copilot and to ask it to make updates into your CRM if you're using Salesforce. But that capability is brought to you with this Copilot for Sales product. So now it's going to enrich. Not only do you now have your Microsoft Graph grounded information where it can pull from your own SharePoints, OneDrives, your Teams messages, your Teams calls, Outlook, but now you can also draw info right out of Salesforce. So it's going to bring you all of that context and kind of bring best of both worlds together. Now, the Microsoft 365 Copilot, and again, that's the one that just grounds with work data and it integrates with your Office apps. That's going to be roughly $30 per user per month. The Copilot for Sales SKU, which will again, it's going to enrich that experience and bring you the Salesforce integration. That's going to be $50 per user per month. Now, the good news is you don't have to pay for both. So if you have Copilot for Sales, it's going to integrate with your CRM, but it's also going to bring you, everything that's covered in Microsoft 365 Copilot. So you will see organizations that are going to have users in all three categories, really. You're going to have, some users that maybe they're not heavy Office users, like their role just doesn't require that, but they still might want to be able to have access to like an HR chatbot agent that you're using. So in that case, you don't need to license that user with, the M365 Copilot license. They can use that free version, the Copilot chat. And then as they use that bot, the agent rather, they're going to, consume your company's messaging packs or that pay-as-you-go model for those transactions. So you can see some cost savings there if you're not planning a whole ton of volume. Then you might have some users that are heavy Office users that do need that integration with, let's say, Teams and Outlook, and you can license those users with M365 Copilot. And if those folks aren't really using your CRM and they're not interacting with customers, they probably don't need that full-blown sales SKU. But the folks that are, your account management, your sales teams, those teams that are interacting directly with your customers on a regular basis and using those office suites, they're really going to want that sales skew. You're going to see a lot of time savings there. So what does Copilot for Sales really bring you? As I mentioned, the best and the simplest way to look at it is the integration with your CRM. So how is this helpful? Let's say I've got a long-standing customer. We've done lots of different engagements with them. We've had some products that we've worked to help them build. We've done some services on those products, and we're maintaining all of that historical data on that relationship in Salesforce. Now, if I just have the Microsoft 365 Copilot license and I pop up a new email that comes from this customer, I can ask it questions about this customer, but it's only going to draw from emails that it finds or from, like maybe SOWs that we have saved on a OneDrive or a SharePoint, stuff like that. If I have the sales SKU, it's also going to pop up for me info from my Salesforce account. So it's going to give me context from opportunities and deals that were closed and won that are in my Salesforce account. If I have notes in there, it can draw from there. And it can do it right in Outlook. So in Outlook, you've kind of got that chat or the Copilot icon. If you are a Copilot for Sales user, you can actually toggle between Copilot and Copilot for Sales. And with that Copilot for Sales, what it does is as you're reading this latest email from customer, A, it will show you all of those key details and key notes from your CRM right there. So it's a great way, instead of having to bounce back and forth between Outlook and your Salesforce, you can have it all in one spot. So it really can save some time, especially if you want to refer back to old information and make sure that you don't miss anything. If you're an account manager that's managing, more than a dozen accounts, things can get complicated. You might have sold the same product to like 6 or 7 of your accounts, and you can't quite remember if this customer is in that boat. Well, you no longer have to spend the time to go back and go into your CRM. You can find that info right there through that Copilot for Sales integration. Um, so that's one really cool use case of it. The other thing too is just adding in notes, right from Copilot into your Salesforce, so it can write back to it. So, if maybe the customer asked me a question and I've decided on the spot here, I'm going to offer some kind of a discount on the pricing. I can provide that update to Copilot for Sales right there in Outlook. And, whereas before, I'm going to have to remember that, go into my Salesforce. It's going to take me, not long, a couple of minutes. But again, if you're using a lot of customers on a day-to-day basis, that couple minutes per transaction can really add up, where I no longer have to go into there. I can just go right into Outlook, make that update. Thank you to Copilot. So uh, one other thing before we do talk about our one demo for the day, another really cool use case that you might have for this is if you're doing a Teams meeting, with the customer. So let's say you're meeting with them, you've got some kind of a picture going over with them, or maybe it's just like an MBR, QBR type of situation, but you're in this meeting with Copilot for Sales. You can get that Salesforce data access to that right there while you're in the call. So maybe they bring up something about a deal you guys did together a year and a half ago. You no longer have to, kind of sit there and try to remember what happened on the spot, or, frantically try to open up any information. You can just kind of use Copilot the way you're used to, ask it questions, and it can draw that data from Salesforce. So again, you're paying an additional $20 per user per month for that. But if you're using Salesforce quite frequently, it's going to pay for itself really, really fast. So those are the high level cliff notes on what Copilot for Sales is and what new value it brings versus Microsoft 365 Copilot. We just have one demo for you today, and we're going to go ahead and dive into that now. Okay, so our demo today, we're going to show you how to quickly add a new contact into Salesforce using Copilot for Sales. So set the ground here. So this is somebody that's stumbled across our website. They have some questions on some of our Copilot adoption and change management services, and they want to learn more. So I want to do a couple things here. One, I want to respond to this, this inquiry, obviously, but I also want to start tracking this in my Salesforce and kind of keep this lead, keep the normal details here. So before Copilot, what I was going to do is I'm going to have to, put in this contact information at the very least in Salesforce by either copying and pasting each, the first name, then the last name, the email address, hopefully they have a phone number in the signature line or whatever, and put all that in there, or, eyeball it and hope that I don't miss a letter or something in the name. So, uh, if I wanted to make it even better, I'm going to have to go look up online by just searching about the company and see if I can figure out what industry they're in, size of the company, revenue, things like that. But couple of ways Copilot can help me there. So it can enrich my Salesforce entry by, and this is something that comes with, even the free version of Copilot is I might ask it if it's not a brand name or a company name that I don't recognize. I might ask, Copilot to help me out with what's the industry, where are they headquartered, how many employees do they have, revenue, stuff like that. And it can draw from that publicly available information and help me enrich that account in Salesforce. But when it comes to Copilot for Sales, it can also help me by adding in those new contacts in my Salesforce account directly here from Outlook. So I don't even have to have Salesforce open. Nor do I have to copy over any information. So before I get into adding the contact, I do want to touch on one other thing. So I've got this summary by Copilot icon here, which that's there as an M365 Copilot licensed user, but the difference is with the Copilot for Sales is it's going to enrich its response using Salesforce data if I already had this customer in there. So let's say, if this particular customer, maybe we were already engaged with them for some other services, or maybe they'd contacted us before. This summary, when I click on it, it's not only going to provide me information summarizing the email I received, but it's also going to give me that context from Salesforce. So kind of enriches those responses. And I think, enriching is the right word to think of here when you talk about Copilot for Sales, grounding it with that data in your CRM. Okay, so with Copilot, I always have this icon up here, this quick access icon. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And it pops open that typical, kind of chat experience here. Now, as a Copilot for Sales user, what I see are these kind of hamburger icon or hamburger lines here. I click on that, and I'm just going to scroll right down here and select Sales. Now, I already had set mine up. I told you in the intro how easy it is to set this up, but it's already integrated and connected to my Salesforce. It'll take, about 10-15 seconds to make that connection. And once it has nothing for me here because I haven't added this account in my Salesforce. So if I had, existing opportunities or closed deals with them or additional contacts from this company, or even, like industry data in there on the company, that would all show up right here. But since this is a new account, it doesn't have any of that context. There's nothing there to draw from. But where this becomes easy is no longer am I using a separate screen with Salesforce. I can just click add contact, and it's going to fill in the details here that it thinks belongs. I don't have an email signature here with this fake email I just sent, so it's not going to draw from a job title, but I've seen it do that before where it can see like, hey, it says Grant Stalley, data analyst or whatever. It'll pull in that title. If it can recognize the company and see that, it's already an account that we have, then it can pull that in here as well. Otherwise, I can just manually add in that account detail. Phone number, if it finds that somewhere down here, then it's going to pull in that phone number. But, it's not going to do that since I don't have a phone number in here. But, if I want to just quickly add in contacts here, couldn't be any simpler. Right here in Salesforce pulls in a lot of this info. I quickly fill it in. I'm not even having to compare screens, like I'm not looking up at my Salesforce and down on my email. It's right in front of me. I enter that and just click save. And again, really easy way to save new contacts, and really, really helpful if you're doing, kind of a routine of updating contacts in your Salesforce account. In today's journey of the Copilot Compass, we talked about Copilot for Sales. We explained some of the differences between M365 Copilot and Copilot for Sales. We talked about the scenarios in which you might want the sales license versus wanting just the M365 Copilot license versus maybe just needing, Copilot chat access. And then, we kind of dove in a little bit and explained some of the benefits of Copilot for Sales, And then we wrapped up with one quick demo, which was adding new contacts to Salesforce directly from Outlook.
Yeah, that was a really cool demo. I personally don't have a Copilot for Sales license, so kind of learning all this as we go along. But it seems super useful, especially if you're using Salesforce a ton. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So if you like this episode, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and comment. And remember, we have our Q&A sessions. So leave a comment or email the email address in the description with your own question. And remember that new episodes are released each Tuesday. And stay tuned for a sneak preview of what we have next.
Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.